There's something about absolute power that's both timeless and incredibly dangerous. It's a force that has literally built and destroyed empires. It's turned heroes into monsters, and it's left a permanent, often bloody stain on our history.
You know, this quote, it gets right to the very heart of what we're exploring. The idea here isn't just that power makes good people go bad, it's that power acts like a magnet, drawing in people who already have that capacity for tyranny, and then it hands them the keys to the castle. This is a concept that's going to echo through every story we look at today.
So that leads us to the critical question, right? In a functioning society, you have things like a free press, independent courts, political opposition. They're like guardrails on a highway. But what happens when someone starts systematically tearing those guardrails down? Well, today, we're going to examine 5 historical figures who answered that question in some of the most horrifying ways imaginable.
All right, here's our roadmap. We'll start with Adolf Hitler, then move to Joseph Stalin. We'll look at Napoleon Bonaparte, Benito Mussolini, and finish the case studies with Mao Zedong. And after we've seen their paths to power and the devastation they left behind, we're going to dig into the psychology of it all. Why does absolute power so often lead to absolute catastrophe?
Our journey begins in the ruins of post-World War I Germany, with a name that has really become the definition of evil in our modern world.
Hitler's rise to power was shockingly fast, and he didn't grab it in a violent coup, not at first anyway. He was actually appointed chancellor. Then, he masterfully exploited a national crisis, the fire that burned down the German parliament building, to push through an emergency decree. And just like that, with a single piece of paper, he suspended civil liberties and paved the way for him to become the absolute ruler, the Führer, just 1 year later. And once that door was kicked open, there was just no turning back. Any illusion of democracy completely vanished. He weaponized existing laws like gun registries to disarm his political enemies and Jewish citizens, a tactic you'll see pop up again. He then methodically eliminated anyone who stood against him, creating these terrifying organizations like the Gestapo and the SS to enforce his rule. And of course, this all culminated in the invasion of Poland, which started the deadliest war in human history, and the orchestration of the Holocaust. This number, it shows the horrific, staggering result of one man's unchecked power. Over 17 million people killed by his regime. It's a figure so immense, it's almost impossible to fully comprehend. It's a chilling reminder of where that path of tyranny really leads.
Now, at the very same time over in the Soviet Union, a different ideology was being used, but the outcome was tragically, horrifyingly similar.
Unlike Hitler's lightning-fast ascent, Stalin's takeover was more of a slow, methodical grind. After Lenin died, Stalin used his position as general secretary to quietly fill the Communist Party with people loyal only to him. He didn't have to win some big, dramatic election. He just built the entire political machine around himself, one piece at a time, until he was the only one left pulling the levers. His transformation from a party bureaucrat into an absolute tyrant was just fueled by extreme paranoia and brutality. And here we see it again. He used firearm registries to disarm peasants who dared to resist his takeover of their farms. He unleashed the Great Terror, this wave of paranoia where he executed hundreds of thousands of people, including many from his own party. He expanded the Gulag prison camps into a massive network of slave labor, and even engineered famines to crush entire populations, all while building this cult of personality that painted him as some kind of benevolent father of the nation.
And the human cost was just staggering. We're talking a minimum of 20 million lives lost under his rule. And some historians argue that the real number is much, much higher. In the dark accounting of tyranny, his death toll is right up there with Hitler's.
Okay, let's take a step back in time. Not all tyrants start out as villains. Our next figure was actually celebrated as a revolutionary hero before his own ambition consumed him, and along with him, an entire continent. I mean, Napoleon Bonaparte was a true military genius, right? He was a product of the French Revolution's promise that talent mattered more than your family name. He seized power in a coup, but at first he presented himself as a leader of the Republic. But his transformation says it all. He went from first consul to emperor. In this moment of incredible arrogance, he literally took the crown from the Pope and placed it on his own head. That psychological shift is everything. He started to believe that he was France. This grandiose idea, this merging of his ego with the destiny of the nation, led him to wage endless wars just to expand his own power, which of course led to the disastrous mistake of invading Russia.
So from France, we now head to early 20th century Italy. And here we find the man who basically wrote the playbook for modern fascism, creating a blueprint that others, especially Hitler, would follow very closely.
Benito Mussolini really perfected the playbook for the 20th century strongman. He didn't win some fair and square election. He used the threat of violence from his black shirt thugs to basically bully the government into making him prime minister. And from that point on, he systematically made himself Il Duce, the leader. He banned all other political parties, took over the media to broadcast his own mythology, and created a secret police to crush anyone who disagreed. Psychologically, he started to believe his own hype, developing this cartoonish, larger-than-life image of himself as Italy's savior. It was a delusion that made him completely detached from reality and led him straight into a disastrous alliance with Nazi Germany.
Our final case study, it might just be the most devastating of them all. We now go to China, to a leader whose obsessive quest to forge a new society led to the single deadliest man-made disaster in all of human history.
After winning a long and bloody civil war in 1949, Mao Zedong's ambition was, well, total. He didn't just want to rule China. He wanted to tear the entire country down to its studs and rebuild it from scratch according to his own ideology. And this led to one radical, violent campaign after another, the end of all private property, the disastrous Great Leap Forward, and the absolute chaos of the Cultural Revolution.
His decisions were absolute, and they were catastrophic. He outlawed private gun ownership. He literally declared war on tradition itself, destroying ancient temples, art, and beliefs. Intellectuals, teachers, anyone even suspected of not being loyal enough was purged. His Great Leap Forward wasn't a leap at all. It was a nosedive into the worst famine the world has ever seen. Then came the Cultural Revolution, a decade of pure terror that turned young people against their elders and set out to destroy whatever was left of China's heritage.
Just look at this number. During the Great Leap Forward alone, it's estimated that more than 45 million people died. That is more than the entire population of many modern countries. It's a number that cements Mao Zedong's legacy as history's greatest mass murderer, the ultimate tragic example of what happens when one man's vision is forced upon millions without any restraint whatsoever.
So we've seen the horrifying results. Hitler, Stalin, Napoleon, Mussolini, Mao. You can't deny the pattern. But the question is why? Why does this happen over and over again? To get that answer, we actually have to look at the psychology of power itself.
Now this is fascinating. Scientists and historians have given a name to this phenomenon, hubris syndrome. And it's not just a poetic term. There's real research suggesting that having immense power for a long time can literally change how your brain works. It can reduce your capacity for empathy, make you more impulsive, and basically make you blind to risk. In a very real sense, absolute power can act like a form of acquired brain injury. And what makes that even worse are what psychologists call the dark triad of personality traits. First, you have narcissism, that grandiose sense of self and hostility to any criticism. Then there's Machiavellianism, the willingness to lie, cheat, and manipulate to get what you want. And finally, psychopathy, a terrifying lack of empathy or remorse. When people with these traits get drawn to power, which they often are, you get a perfect storm for what experts call leadership derailment, where their own personality defects actively drive a country into ruin.
So, how do you spot these people before it's too late? Well, two political scientists created this simple 4-point checklist. First, do they reject the democratic rules of the game? Second, do they call their political opponents illegitimate or traitors or criminals? Third, do they tolerate or even encourage violence from their supporters? And fourth, are they eager to shut down the press or restrict civil liberties? The really chilling lesson from history is that these warning signs are almost always there, clear as day, before these individuals get total control.
And that, really, brings us to the final and most important point. The stories of these 5 men aren't just history lessons. They are urgent, blinking red lights. They show us that the slide into tyranny follows a predictable script with very clear warning signs. History teaches us that the guardrails of democracy don't maintain themselves. It's up to us, as citizens, to recognize these patterns and to defend the very institutions that are designed to prevent any single person from ever holding absolute power again.